The sun was setting slowly over the small town. A soft wind blew through the open fields, carrying the scent of dust and silence. At the far end of the shooting range, a girl stood alone, quiet, still, and unnoticed. Her name was Alia. She was not tall. She didn't speak much. Her clothes were plain, and her eyes were always looking down. People called her strange or shy. Most of them didn't even remember her name. She had become invisible, even when standing in front of them. But Alia wasn't here for attention. She was here for something else, something deeper, something she had carried in her heart for years. As she stood near the practice line with her old, rusty rifle, a group of young shooters nearby laughed quietly. "Who let her in here?" one of them whispered. "She doesn't even know how to hold a gun," said another, smirking. Even the club instructor, Mr. Reman, looked at her with doubt in his eyes. "Are you sure you signed up for the right event?" he asked, raising his eyebrows. "This is a competition, not a school picnic." Alia didn't respond. She simply nodded and kept her focus forward. She had heard worse things before. This was nothing new. 2 days ago, Alia had walked into the shooting club with an old paper form. Her hands were shaking as she placed it on the counter. It was her first time here. No one welcomed her. No one smiled. The receptionist looked at the form and then looked at her face. "Are you really joining this?" she asked with a surprised voice. Alia nodded again. Back home, she had spent nights reading her father's diary, pages filled with memories, dreams, and advice. He was a skilled shooter once, before something terrible happened that changed everything. He died in an accident when Alia was just 11, but before he left this world, he had taught her one thing. The real target is not made of wood or paper. It's made of fear. Break that, and you'll hit anything. Those words stayed with her like a shadow. Now, as she loaded her rifle for the first practice round, her fingers trembled. Not from fear, but from the weight of memory. The instructor called her name. "Alia, you're up." She stepped forward. Her heart beat like a drum. Around her, people whispered. Some laughed. Others simply ignored her. Just another waste of time, they thought. Alia took her position. She held the rifle tight. Her breathing was heavy. She closed her eyes for a moment and imagined her father's hand on her shoulder. "Focus, Alia," she whispered to herself. She opened her eyes. The target stood 50 meters ahead, small and silent. She fired. The bullet missed. Laughter broke out. One boy clapped sarcastically. "Nice try, sniper," he joked. Alia stepped back without saying a word, but something in her face had changed. She wasn't broken. She wasn't even surprised. It was just the first step, and she knew the road was long. Later that night, Alia sat alone in her room. The old rifle lay on the bed beside her. She opened her father's diary again. On the back page was a drawing of a target with a message. "Even the strongest bullet is useless without belief." She stared at it for a long time. The next morning, she woke up early. The sky was still dark. She walked quietly out of her house and into the open fields. In her hands was her rifle, and in her heart was a storm. She set up empty cans on a wooden log, took position, closed her eyes. Breathe in, breathe out, focus. She opened her eyes. Bang. One can fell. Bang. Second fell. Bang. Third, straight through the center. No one was watching. No one was clapping. But Alia didn't care. Back at the club, another practice round was beginning. The competition was only days away. Alia stood in the back again, silent, calm. Mr. Reman watched her from a distance. "That girl again," he muttered. "She doesn't have what it takes." But Alia wasn't there to prove anything to them. She was there for her father. For the pain she carried, for the belief she was trying to rebuild. And this time, when she stepped forward with her rifle, she didn't shake. She didn't blink. She fired. And this time, something changed. The sound of the bullet was still echoing in Alia's ears as she walked home that evening. Her second shot had shocked everyone. It wasn't perfect, but it had hit the edge of the bullseye, enough to make people stop laughing, enough to make them look twice, but not enough for her to smile, because she wasn't chasing applause. She was chasing peace. Alia lived in a small, old house at the edge of town. It was the same house her father had once filled with laughter, with stories, and with hope. After his death, it had become quiet, cold, full of memories, but empty of warmth. She walked inside and locked the door. Then, she went straight to the wooden box under her father's bed. It had been sealed for years. That night, for the first time, she opened it. Inside was her father's old army rifle, wrapped in a faded cloth. Alongside it were a pair of gloves, a photo of them together, and a notebook. Not just any notebook. It was his shooting log, a record of every shot he ever took, every score, every lesson he learned. As she turned the pages, her hands shook. She saw her own name written on one page. Alia -7 years old. First time holding a rifle. Scared, but brave. I see fire in her. Her eyes filled with tears. She remembered that day. She was just a little girl then, standing in the open field behind the house, crying because the gun was too heavy. Her father had kneeled beside her, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. "Don't be afraid, Beta," he had said. "This is not a weapon. It's a lesson. It teaches focus, patience, control." She had closed her eyes and pulled the trigger. The sound had scared her, but her father had clapped, laughing with pride. "You missed the target," he said, "but you hit my heart." Now, years later, she looked at the same rifle, older, worn out, but still powerful. Alia wiped her tears and held it close. She knew what she had to do. Every night, when the world slept, Alia would walk into the forest behind her house. She carried the rifle and a small bag of empty cans. She set them up on rocks, trees, and fences. Then she practiced. Bang, bang, bang. Sometimes she missed, sometimes she hit, but every time, she got better. Her hands stopped shaking. Her eyes stopped blinking. Her focus became stronger. Her body moved with calm precision, like the wind through the trees. This was her father's gift, and she was finally unwrapping it. Back at the shooting club, the talk had changed. "Did you see her last shot?" one boy asked. "Beginner's luck," another replied. "She'll break in the real rounds." Only Zoya, the club's top shooter, was silent. She had noticed something others didn't. The look in Alia's eyes. It wasn't pride. It was purpose. And that made her nervous. The next morning, Mr. Rehman called the group together. "The first round of the competition begins in 2 days," he said. "Only the top 5 will qualify for semifinals. Practice hard." He turned to Alia. "You, try not to fall apart on stage." The others laughed. Alia said nothing. That night, in the forest, she trained harder, faster, longer. One evening, as she was packing up her cans, she heard a voice behind her. "You think this is enough to win?" It was Zoya. She stood with crossed arms, wearing a smug smile. Her own rifle rested on her shoulder like a crown. Alia didn't answer. Zoya stepped closer. "You're wasting your time. This isn't your place." Still no reply. Zoya smirked. "You don't scare me, you know. You're just a sad little story trying to end in a happy way. But life doesn't work like that." Then she walked away. Alia stood there staring at the empty cans. Her face remained still, but inside, the fire burned hotter. The next day, something unexpected happened. She received a letter. No name, no return address. Just a note inside. "Your father didn't die by accident. They lied to you." Her hands trembled. Who had sent this? What did they mean? She rushed to her father's diary again, flipping pages like a storm. That night, as she tried to sleep, her mind was full of questions, and one answer kept rising. Win the competition. Find the truth. The day of the first round arrived. Crowds filled the stands. Cameras flashed. Judges took their seats. One by one, the shooters stepped up. Zoya hit perfect marks. The crowd cheered. Then came Alia's turn. She stepped forward. People whispered, "Let's see if she gets lucky again." She closed her eyes. Breathe in, breathe out. She opened them. Bang. Bullseye. Bang! Bullseye! Bang! Bullseye! The crowd went silent. Then, claps. Real ones. Mr. Rahman sat up straight. Zoya frowned. Alia walked off the stage, her face calm. But in her heart, one sentence echoed. They didn't believe in me, but my father did, and that's all I need. The crowd's applause still echoed in Alia's ears long after she walked off the shooting stage. For the first time, people had stopped laughing. For the first time, she had heard claps instead of whispers. But still, she didn't smile. She sat quietly in the corner of the practice area, holding her father's diary close to her chest. The words from the mysterious note were still playing in her mind. Your father didn't die by accident. They lied to you. She had read it at least 100 times. Who had sent this? What did they know? Why now? Her fingers turned the pages of the diary again. One page caught her eye, written in small, shaky handwriting, almost as if her father had written it in a hurry. They're watching me. If anything happens to me, it's not an accident. Keep your eyes on the club. Her heartbeat slowed. She wasn't imagining it. There was a secret. And somehow, it was hidden in the place where everyone now clapped for her. The next day, Alia qualified for the semifinals. Her name was printed on the board alongside Zoya and 3 other shooters. Everyone looked shocked, except Zoya. She looked angry. In the locker room, Zoya confronted her. You think you're special now, she said, voice sharp. Alia didn't answer. Zoya stepped closer. You think you'll win this? Let me give you some advice. This club destroys people like you. People who think silence is power. This isn't a game you're ready for. Alia looked at her, not with fear, but with calm eyes. Then she walked away. Zoya stared after her, her jaw tight. For the first time, she felt something she hadn't before. Uncertainty. That night, Alia sat on the rooftop of her house, looking at the stars. Her father used to say the stars were like old friends, always watching, always guiding. She opened the notebook again. At the back, there was a drawing she hadn't noticed before. A circle, a triangle inside it, and a single name written under it. RM. She whispered it. RM. Who are you? Was it a person? A place? A code? She didn't know yet. But she would find out. The semi-final was only 1 day away. Alia knew she had to stay focused. She went back to the forest early in the morning. Her hands were steady now. Her breathing was smoother. She didn't flinch when she pulled the trigger. Bang, bang, bang. She hit every can. But then, something strange happened. She noticed her scope was loose. She checked it. The screws had been turned. Someone had touched her rifle. Her heart dropped. Sabotage. She rushed home and checked her bag. Nothing else seemed touched. But the message was clear. We're watching you. Someone didn't want her to reach the finals. The day of the semi-final arrived. The crowd was bigger. Media cameras were rolling. Reporters were whispering about the quiet girl with the old rifle. Zoya stood on one side of the line. Alia stood on the other. Mr. Rahman stood behind them both, his face unreadable. 5 targets. 1 shot each. Top 2 will move to the final, the announcer said. Alia took her place. She held the rifle, closed her eyes, and whispered, I'm not afraid. She opened them. The first shot, bullseye. Second, bullseye. Third, bullseye. Zoya fired perfectly too. Now, only 1 shot remained. The target for this round was harder, smaller, hidden partly behind a branch. Zoya fired first. Hit. The crowd clapped. Alia took a deep breath. She remembered her father's voice. Don't just shoot with your eyes, shoot with your soul. She aimed. Bang. The bullet cut cleanly through the smallest part of the target. Silence. Then cheers. She had done it. The announcer shouted. Alia and Zoya are moving to the final round. But Alia wasn't smiling. She had seen something in the corner of the room just before she fired. A man in a dark suit, watching her closely. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't smiling. He had a badge clipped to his belt. And on it were 2 letters. That night, As she walked home in the dark, her thoughts were racing. Who was that man? What did he want? And why did the letter and the notebook both point to him? Suddenly, she heard a sound behind her. Footsteps. She turned. No one. She walked faster. The footsteps came again. She broke into a run, turned a corner, and stopped. No one. Just silence. And a small paper under her door when she reached home. She opened it. Inside was a photo. Her father, standing next to a younger Mr. Reman. And behind them, Zoya's father. Her hands shook. Her eyes filled with tears. This was bigger than just a competition. This was about her father's life. And now, as the night was cold, but Alia's hands were sweating. She sat on her bed, staring at the old photo under the dim light of a lamp. Her father, Mr. Reman, and Zoya's father, all standing together, smiling, wearing the same badge. What did this mean? Her father had never told her about these men. He never mentioned working with Mr. Reman. And Zoya's father, Alia had only seen him once, during a club event. He looked powerful, rich, and distant. Now she knew they all had a history. Alia held the photo tightly and looked back at the letter from before. They lied to you. She took her father's diary again, flipping through the pages slowly, reading every word with new eyes. Then she stopped at one sentence that seemed unimportant earlier. Aunt doesn't like questions, but I keep asking them. Her breath caught. Was that Mr. Reman? Or someone else? Alia knew only one way to find out. The next morning, before practice, Alia went to the club early. She walked through the hallway like a shadow, quiet and focused. She reached Mr. Reman's office. Locked. She looked around. No one. She took a deep breath and reached into her pocket. She had taken a pin from her mother's sewing box. She inserted it into the lock, hands shaking. Click. The door opened. Inside was a small, dusty office with old files, trophies, and framed photos. On the desk was a black notebook labeled 1997. The year her father died. She opened it. Page after page of names, scores, events. Then, on the last page, Zoya's father pulled the trigger. I saw it, but I can't speak. They'll ruin me too. Alia's blood froze. She read it again. Zoya's father killed her father? And RMU? Suddenly, she heard footsteps. She closed the notebook fast, placed it back, and rushed out the door. Just before Mr. Reman entered the hallway. He didn't see her. But now, she had seen everything. Back in the forest that evening, Alia fired at a row of cans. Bang, bang, bang. Every shot hit. But her heart wasn't steady. She sat under a tree and cried, quietly. She remembered her father's last day, how he hugged her longer than usual, how he told her, no matter what happens, always follow the truth, even if it hurts. Now she understood what he meant. He had known something, and they silenced him for it. At the final practice before the championship, Zoya walked up to her again. You think you're brave now? She asked, arms crossed. Everyone's talking about you. But let me remind you, this club belongs to us. Alia looked up at her, not angry but steady. You're right, she said softly. But truth doesn't belong to anyone. It just waits for someone to speak it. Zoya froze. She didn't expect that answer, but her eyes narrowed. You better be careful what you dig into, she whispered. Some stories end badly. And then she walked away. That night, Alia couldn't sleep. Her thoughts were too loud. She stood at her window, watching the moonlight fall across the quiet street. The photo lay on her desk, the diary beside it, and in her heart, a storm was building. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. We warned you. Stop, or your next bullet won't be for practice. She froze, hands trembling. Tears filled her eyes, not from fear, but from rage. She whispered, You took my father, but I won't let you take my voice. The day of the final arrived. The stadium was full. Media, reporters, special guests. And among them, Alia spotted two people she hadn't seen before, a tall man in a black coat and a woman with a badge. She couldn't hear them, but they were speaking to Mr. Rehman. He looked nervous. Zoya's father was also there, sitting in the front row. Alia's hands tightened around her rifle. It was time. The announcer's voice echoed. Final round. One shot. One target. The tightest group wins. Zoya stepped up first. She fired. Bullseye. Clean. Precise. Crowd cheered. Then Alia walked to the line. Everything went quiet. She looked at the target. Then at the crowd. Then she raised her rifle, not at the paper target, but at the sky. Everyone gasped. But then she turned toward the judges and fired. Right through the speaker system. It exploded with a loud spark. Panic. Confusion. People stood up. Guards rushed forward. Alia shouted into the silence. My father didn't die by accident. Zoya's father killed him, and Mr. Rehman saw it all. Everyone froze. Eyes turned toward the front. The tall man in the black coat pulled out a badge. Military intelligence. He walked up the stage. You did good, Alia, he said. We've been waiting for someone to confirm it. The truth needed a trigger. Mr. Rehman was pale. Zoya's father tried to walk out, but guards stopped him. Zoya still in shock, her world crashing down. And Alia? She lowered her rifle, tears in her eyes, but her face, peaceful. The final match was over, but Alia didn't care about the medal. She didn't care about the cameras or the people whispering her name. All she cared about was the truth. And now it was finally in the open. Zoya's father was arrested. Mr. Rehman was taken into custody for questioning. The club was shut down for investigation. But Alia didn't smile. Not yet. Because deep inside, something still felt incomplete. That night, Alia sat by her window, holding the photo of her father again. Her fingers moved slowly over his face in the picture. For years, she had lived in silence. For years, no one had believed her. But now, her father's name was being spoken again. Not as a forgotten man who died in an accident, but as a hero. The next day, two military officers came to her home. One of them, the same man from the final match, stood with respect in front of her. You showed courage, he said. Your father would be proud. Alia nodded slowly. I need to know everything, she said. He looked at her carefully, then opened a folder and handed it to her. Inside were reports, old photos, confidential stamps. Your father was one of us, the man said. He wasn't just a shooter. He was working undercover in the club. He discovered that Zoya's father and a few others were selling weapons to the wrong people, dangerous people. He tried to report it, but before he could, they made it look like a training accident. Alia's hands shook as she turned the pages. Mr. Rehman saw it, but he stayed quiet to protect himself. The man placed a hand gently on her shoulder. You finishing this story gave us what we needed. The voice of the victim's daughter is stronger than any file. Later that evening, Alia visited her father's grave. She knelt down quietly, placed the photo and the diary beside the headstone, and whispered, I know the truth now, Baba. They tried to break me, but your story is safe. I'll protect it, always. The wind blew softly through the trees. For the first time in years, her tears weren't from pain. They were from peace. Days passed. The news spread everywhere. Girl exposes murder of national hero father after years of silence. People came to her, journalists, officials, young girls who had once been told to stay quiet. They looked at her with admiration. But Alia didn't want fame. She wanted something else. Justice. She wanted every girl who had been ignored to be heard. So she started something new. With help from a local community, Alia opened a small shooting academy. But this one was different. It wasn't just about winning medals. It was about training girls from villages from poor backgrounds. Those with no support, just like she once was. She named it the silent trigger, because sometimes the quietest voices create the loudest impact. One day, as she trained a group of young girls, a car pulled up outside. A woman stepped out. It was Zoya. She looked tired, broken, but different. She walked toward Alia slowly, holding something wrapped in cloth. I don't expect forgiveness, Zoya said. But I didn't know what my father had done. I was blind. I was proud. I was wrong. She placed the wrapped item in Alia's hands and turned to walk away. Alia opened it. Inside was a gold medal, Zoya's championship medal. You deserve this more than me, the note said. You hit the real target, and I finally see that now. Alia didn't say a word. She simply stood there, watching Zoya walk away, her heart feeling lighter. Sometimes, the biggest victories are not the ones you win in front of crowds, but the ones you win in silence. That night, as Alia closed her eyes, she saw her father again in her dreams, smiling, peaceful, proud, and she whispered, like she had every night before, I miss you, Baba, but I found your truth. And this time, she added, and now, I'll help others find theirs too. The sun was setting over the training field, casting long shadows on the dusty ground. Alia stood beside a row of young girls, all holding rifles, their eyes filled with hope, not fear. It had been 6 months since the truth about her father came out. 6 months since Zoya's father was arrested. 6 months since Alia turned her pain into a purpose. But now, something new was happening. A government official had visited her academy just 2 days ago. He had watched quietly as the girls trained, listened as Alia spoke gently to them, correcting their stances, calming their nerves. Before leaving, he handed her an envelope. National Shooting Championship. Will card entry. You've earned this, he said. Alia froze. She hadn't competed since the final round where she exposed the truth. She had promised herself she was done with competitions. But this invitation wasn't just about medals. It was about standing tall, not as a victim, but as a voice. Now, standing in the capital's grand arena, she looked around at the huge stadium. Crowds, cameras, flags waving. Everyone had come to see one girl return. Alia. Her name was now a symbol, a fighter, a truth-teller. And across the shooting line was Zoya. Yes, she had qualified again. Not as the angry, proud girl she once was, but as someone with regret in her eyes and respect in her heart. They didn't speak, but their eyes met. And Alia nodded softly. Zoya nodded back. This was no longer about revenge. It was about redemption. The announcer's voice echoed. Final round. 1 target. 1 bullet. Winner takes gold. Alia stepped forward. The crowd went silent. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes didn't blink. She took a deep breath and aimed. In her mind, she heard her father's voice one last time. The last bullet is not fired with your hand. It's fired with your heart. Bang. The bullet flew straight through the center of the target. Perfect. Alia slowly lowered her rifle. She didn't look at the scoreboard. She just closed her eyes and smiled. Not because she hit the target, but because she finally hit peace. The crowd rose to their feet. Thunderous applause. Flashes of cameras. Reporters rushed forward. But Alia walked past them all. She didn't wait for a medal. She didn't need a trophy. She had already won what mattered most. Her father's truth. Her own voice. And now, she had inspired others to believe that silence doesn't mean weakness. Later that evening, as she sat under the stars with her students, one little girl asked softly, Daddy, why don't you keep the medals? Alia smiled gently. Because real victory is not something you wear on your neck, it's something you feel in your soul. As night fell, Alia looked up at the sky. One star blinked brighter than the rest. And she whispered, This was for you, Baba. The last bullet was for truth. Years passed. Seasons changed. But the memory of that one girl, Alia, never faded. Not in the hearts of the girls she trained. Not in the field where her footsteps still echoed. And not in the country that finally knew her name. After her historic return at the national championship, Alia didn't continue with the media spotlight. She quietly returned to her small academy in the village. The silent trigger was now known all over the country. Parents who once stopped their daughters from touching a rifle were now bringing them to Alia with pride in their eyes. One of those girls was Sana, a shy, thin 13-year-old from a nearby town. Sana had lost her father in an accident, just like Alia. She hardly spoke. But the day she picked up a rifle, Alia saw something in her eyes, the same fire. Alia trained her slowly, gently. Day by day, Sana learned not only how to shoot, but how to stand tall. At night, Alia would often sit in the quiet shooting field, looking up at the stars. The pain of the past never disappeared, but it no longer controlled her. She had turned her father's silence into a movement. She had turned her heartbreak into hope for others. And that was her real victory. One winter morning, Alia stood in front of her class of girls. She looked calm, but there was something different in her eyes. "Soon, I'll be going away for some time," she said softly. "But this place, this dream, it will continue, because you will carry it." The girls looked at each other confused. "Why are you leaving, Didi?" Sana asked. Alia smiled. "I'm not leaving forever. I'm just giving you the stage now. It's your turn to lead. I was never the story. I was just the first bullet." A few weeks later, the country held its biggest youth competition ever, and Sana was one of the finalists. Her name was announced alongside older, richer competitors. But when she stepped up, the crowd saw something familiar in her eyes. Calm, steady, powerful. She aimed and fired. Bullseye. The crowd stood up, not just for the shot, but because behind her, watching from the stands, was Alia, now wearing a simple white kurta, her rifle by her side, and tears in her eyes. Not because Sana won, but because the legacy was alive. Later that night, a reporter approached Alia. "You've changed so many lives. What do you want people to remember you for?" Alia looked at the girls laughing in the field. She thought for a moment, then said, "I don't want them to remember me for the medals or the story. I want them to remember that one voice, no matter how small, can silence 1,000 lies." Years later, a statue was placed at the center of the academy grounds, not of Alia with a medal, but of her sitting under a tree, rifle across her lap, diary in her hands. At the base, one sentence was carved: "She aimed for the truth and never missed." And in every corner of the country, whenever a girl picked up a rifle, or spoke a truth no one wanted to hear, or stood up after being pushed down, someone would whisper, "She's like Alia."